This is a major, sensitive real-world war, so I'll keep this factual and balanced, presenting the documented events and the different sides' stated rationale rather than taking a position on who is right. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated military strikes on Iran, marking the start of a full-scale war whose roots trace back decades. The opening strikes targeted Iranian military and nuclear-related sites, and among those killed was Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Iran responded within hours, launching hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones toward Israel, U.S. bases across the Gulf, and neighboring states. What followed was a rapid regional escalation, pulling in proxy forces and several neighboring countries, and disrupting global shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. While the immediate trigger was clear, coordinated airstrikes followed by Iranian retaliation. Understanding why this war happened requires looking back at decades of tension between Washington, Tehran, and the broader region, alongside a set of specific political decisions made in the weeks leading up to the first strikes. The roots of this conflict stretch back to long-standing disputes over Iran's nuclear program and its influence across the Middle East, tensions that trace their origin partly to the 1953 coup and have since been shaped by decades of proxy wars, economic sanctions, and cyber attacks between the two nations. In the months before the war, tensions had already been intensifying due to Iran's violent crackdown on the 2025 to 2026 anti-government protests, during which Iranian security forces killed large numbers of civilian demonstrators. Despite this backdrop of unrest, diplomacy hadn't entirely broken down. The U.S. and Iran had actually begun indirect negotiations in Oman in February 2026, and by late that month, Iran had reportedly made a surprising offer regarding its nuclear program, with both sides agreeing to meet again in Vienna to iron out technical details. Major disagreements remained, however, particularly around U.S. demands that Iran fully dismantle both its nuclear program and its ballistic missile capabilities. The official justification given by U.S. and Israeli leadership was that this was a preemptive act of self-defense, based on the argument that diplomacy had failed to contain what they described as an unacceptable and potentially existential threat posed by Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. However, this rationale has faced significant internal scrutiny within the U.S. government itself. Senator Mark Warner of the Senate Intelligence Committee, after being briefed ahead of the war, stated there was no evidence Iran was preparing to strike the U.S. first, and suggested the decision to go to war ultimately came from Israel. President Trump rejected this characterization, stating that ongoing negotiations had led him to believe Iran intended to strike first, and that his actions may have simply forced their hand. Notably, by early April, Trump also stated he no longer cared about Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium because it was stored underground, a claim that directly contradicted one of the central justifications he had originally given for launching the war, while analysts have since assessed that Iran's uranium stockpile actually poses greater risk now than before the conflict began. Once the war began, its consequences spread rapidly across multiple fronts beyond direct military engagement. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil shipping routes, became a major flashpoint, with at least one tugboat sunk, 17 merchant ships damaged, 2 vessels captured, and multiple seafarers killed or missing, triggering a global fuel crisis as the U.S. established a naval blockade and escort operation in response. Cyber warfare also played a significant supporting role, with coordinated U.S.-Israeli operations reportedly disrupting Iranian military command and sensor networks ahead of the initial airstrikes, while Israel separately conducted information operations targeting Iranian state broadcasting and popular civilian apps. Domestically within the United States, the war triggered visible public division, with protests breaking out in front of the White House featuring both supporters and opponents of the strikes, alongside a documented rise in anti-Semitic incidents worldwide connected to the conflict. As the war has progressed into a months-long conflict, Diplomatic efforts toward a ceasefire have continued alongside the fighting, including a U.S.-crafted 15-point peace plan aimed at reopening shipping lanes and addressing the underlying nuclear disputes. However, Iran has reportedly rejected certain proposals or conditioned acceptance on resolving broader regional issues, including the situation in Lebanon, complicating any immediate path to a settlement. Analysts studying the conflict note that Iran's demonstrated ability to withstand sustained economic and military pressure, combined with its extensive regional proxy network, means any lasting agreement will likely require phased concessions and strong verification mechanisms rather than a single decisive resolution. The war has ultimately reinforced each side's core narrative, U.S. and Israeli officials continuing to cite an existential nuclear threat, while Iran points to decades of foreign intervention and sanctions, leaving the conflict's final outcome, and whether it leads toward lasting containment or renewed cycles of violence, still very much undetermined as of this writing. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit subscribe for more videos like this. Drop a like, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.